Are you looking to get into live stream production? Maybe you want to hire someone to produce your live streams for you. On this episode, we're going to be sitting down with Anca Trifan, a live stream producer, to discuss what you need to do to produce high quality live streams. Hey everyone, I'm Christian Karasiewicz, and I'm joined by my co-host Mel, and we're going to be chatting with Anca today about producing high quality streams, but we're going to be talking about it from the angle of she's a live stream producer. So this is something that I think is a really great conversation. So Mel, do you want to go and maybe introduce our guest, or where do you want to kick things off at?
Yeah, let's just get going. Let's bring Anca on. Let's let her kick things off and tell us a little bit about herself. And let's get in, because I know this is a juicy topic. Like, this is, in fact, we were talking before the show, like, hey, this may be a longer episode because there's just so much to talk about. I do think that live streaming production is becoming something that more people are hearing about, more people are interested in, because the way that the software applications have come along that help us provide or create amazing live streams have actually also given us the opportunity to incorporate a producer. So I think it's becoming a very more, just a more popular topic that people are interested in learning about. And so I'm excited to get Anca going. So let's bring her on and let's just get this thing started.
Fantastic. So Anca, thanks a lot for joining us for essentially what is episode 82 of the Launch Your Live podcast in live stream.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Hi there, Christian and Melanie. It's so fun to be here with you. And I follow you guys and I watch your show every so often. So it's good to actually be, here and let's talk about, event productions and live streaming.
Definitely. So I got to say, every time that we start every episode, when we have someone on, we interview them, we always like to start with a question. And that is, not just tell people, okay, so who is Anca, but how did you get into live stream production as well? So who is Anca? What do you do? How did you get into live stream production?
Okay, I'll try to make this short, although I'm not known for doing that. Oh my gosh. So I'm a certified meeting professional, event producer. I like to call myself really a technical event producer. It's a term that it's now coming up more often than before, which is fantastic because I've been using it for about 8 years and everybody was like, what does that mean, right? I am also the founder and creator and the CEO of Trifan Events, which is a boutique event planning and production agency that is offering, event planning, experience design, production management for live, virtual, and hybrid events. Also the host of Events Demystified, where I get to interview so many fun people from the industry and just talk exactly what we're talking about right now, event productions and live streaming and how does this look like now and how is it going to look in the future. And I started with a lot of audiovisual production tips in the beginning, but then hello COVID changed my my run of show and the topic of discussion, and now I'm all about virtual events and live streaming and hybrid events. Really where my career started in production. It's funny because sometimes I think that I'm one of those people that have had a really good high school and college only because I started in radio back then, and that's where the whole thing started. I was working on a show at a radio station, the only radio station in my town where I grew up, really. But it was super fun because it had a really large reach. And what I realized back then is that I was so much more interested, not just being behind the mic, which was fun, right? But it was like in this audio mixer, which is like a Mackie 1404 something. And I was just like tweaking it all the time and like changing things. And so that kind of put me on this path when I left my home country after college and I moved to US to be interested in pursuing sound engineering and pursuing event productions, because I knew at the time, well, I have an accent, I'm not going to go back to radio. Sure enough, years later, I started a podcast, right? Because at this point, I'm like, I don't care, whatever. Because, it's like what you think in your 20s is not the same as you think in your 30s anymore. So anyway, that set me onto this path of really learning everything I could from the ground up. I mean, I started pulling cables. That was like my job in a shop for an AV production back in LA, and all the way to mixing shows front of house for a bunch of cool people. And quite a few big names. And that's basically been my life, for many years. Until COVID, I used to do a lot of live events, a lot of corporate, a lot of nonprofit events as well, for fundraisers, galas, and such. And I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to have this experience before COVID, because when that happened, back in I don't know, February, March of 2020, it wasn't one of those like shocking moments like a lot of us in the event industry really had, where, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? There's not going to be any more events. For me, it was just a transition. I'm like, okay, well, there's no events in person, but guess what? We're going to do virtual streaming events because it's not something new. Like I streamed my wedding 15 years ago. It's like, okay, well, I'm just going to do something that I've done for years, even though we never called it a virtual event, or any of that sort. So I guess having the background of a event planner, event producer, front of house engineer, and technical director, moving into more of a video director, which again, I would have never picked for myself if this was, hey, what do you want to do in your life? Would be like, I want to mix sound forever. And then I ended up doing a lot of video editing and video stuff in 2020 and now 2021. And I'm like, oh, thanks, COVID, for the opportunity of learning something new and for the headache of learning something new. So that's a little bit on me as far as my background. I still do and plan a lot of virtual events, hybrid, quite a few this year, although it sounds like we're going back to virtual for the fall. I don't know. Nobody knows at this point. And I also like to keep myself from not rusting by still, mixing live sound monthly, weekly, whenever the opportunity arises, because honestly, there's nothing like that energy when you're in person. You're behind a mixing board and you absorb not just the energy of the band that you're mixing, but also the crowd. And that is like a little bit of a high that once you have it, you cannot go without. So aside from all of that, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I have 2 children. I work from home a lot of days. I'm also a big advocate of women in the production and technology world. And I like to call myself an optimist and a really strong believer in the goodness of people is really what and collaboration and communication, and really what set me with starting the podcast in the first place, because I was like, well, there's a lot of cool people out there, but you never hear of them until you give them a platform. So I wanted to give people a platform, and obviously it's been easier now that we have all these amazing tools to do that. So I'm grateful whenever I get a chance to share what I know, but even more so when I get to highlight other people that have way more knowledge than I, and they get to, say their take on their experience, expertise, whatever it is that they bring to the table. So yeah, I sort of like touch on your question, right? I mean, did not stray too far, hopefully.
No, you have an amazing background. I love how you talked about how it kind of came together. You're different. You have a varied background, but I loved what you said about, you live streamed your wedding 15 years ago, and, you were doing this type of virtual event thing before we were calling it virtual events, if you will. So it just sounds to me like one of those serendipitous things where, hey, when COVID did happen, the pandemic did happen, and things started to go virtual, you were basically ready to step into this honestly up and coming style of role of live stream producer. So I think it's great. I love that you shared all that, because it really is interesting. I always like to hear the stories behind how people get into live streaming, and that's exactly why Christian loves starting off with that question. But let's keep moving. So what I want you to do, Anca, is, because a lot of people may not really know what we're talking about when we say live stream producer. So can you just let people understand, like, what is a live stream producer? Like, define it for us, let our audience understand what we're talking about here, so that like what that role is.
Absolutely. And just to define also this term that probably I'm going to be using more often than not, when you hear me say virtual event, I'm really thinking of it more of a live streaming of some sort that has a bunch of technical elements and cues attached to it. And because I look at a live stream as the conduit to which you deliver your virtual event with all the additional, bells and whistles that technically should set it apart from other live streams. Now, coming to the question that you asked, and that's a fantastic question. And honestly, I'm pretty sure my answer might be different than a bunch of other answers out there. So I'm just going to give you my version of what I think that a virtual event producer is. Basically, the person behind the scenes that works with you and with a team or without a team, with the help of a team or without the help of a team, right? It could be a solo event producer, or it could be a whole team of people that support that virtual event producer to run the majority of technical decisions and aspects of your virtual event. And this person is primarily the technical contact for the client, for the team, for whomever you're working with during the virtual engagement process, as well as the liaison between you and maybe the production team, the production house that's working on this event, because we can take like a small one-person live stream, right? Or that's like basically would be my podcast. Like I run that, I do that, like I produce it, I host it, I do everything. But there's events that are live streams of the nature that you need an entire team of people to support that event because there's so many elements, and the event objective, needs that kind of support to make it come to life. And as a virtual event producer, you are technically, focusing on the technical aspects of the run of show, of the script, and you will fill in many times, more often than not, as this person that will provide the understanding to the client of what are the technical requirements that create this event that need to be implemented in order to produce this event. And whether you've chosen to maybe pre-record your sessions or present them live, a virtual event producer is the person that should be able to walk you through all the scenarios that can occur when hosting a virtual event and help your MCs, your hosts, your speakers, moderators, everyone that's part of that event, so that you can produce this high quality presentation. So what does a virtual event producer? A lot of things. What do they do? A lot of things. They project manage every technical aspect of this virtual event live stream. They will help with the development of an effective, production plan and create some sort of a event strategy and design an event strategy that helps this event come to life. They will also help and maintain event budgets. Maybe not every virtual event producer does that, but in my role, I do that a lot. I work with the client on the budget and making sure that it fits their event. They also will provide, hopefully an honest and unbiased first-hand description and recommendation of some of the event platforms and benefits that are associated with that platform, or anything that might be the right fit for that event. And they also coordinate, pre-production logistics that have to do with maybe the choosing of the right production house to implement, like especially now that we're moving into hybrid events. I work a lot, not just with the client for the virtual aspect of the event, but also with the production house on the hybrid in-person side of the event to make sure that we have a plan, there's a flow to everything we're doing, and we're all on the same page. And also do a lot of training and on-screen talent support for whomever is going to be there for the event, so they're ready for the prime time. And you might even end up overseeing the event team, the graphics, everything that goes, with the event itself to create, the lower thirds, the title slides, the whatever transitional elements that make that virtual event, live stream stand out. And you will build a production timeline. I build run of shows and production timelines and text scripts a whole lot. So there's a lot of work involved. Just talking about it, I feel like I'm getting tired, but really there's a lot of work involved in doing an event right. And some of those roles, might be something that you delegate within your team, or it might be that you take a lot of that onto yourself. And when I have a discussion with a client and they're there to hire me for the event for the day, I'm not thinking about the 1 hour that I'm going to be streaming that event. I'm thinking about all the pre-production planning that goes into that event, leading to when you're ready to go and press live, right? So there's a lot of work that goes, and that's where like sometimes it gets confusing with people when they're like, well, I charge this much. And I'm like, for the day of, like, wait a second, did you forget about all the work that you have to do leading to that event? Who's going to do that work? I mean, sure, I'm here to support the nonprofit sector, but I also have to pay some bills to, to be able to support this operation over here. So, yeah.
And
does that give you a good definition of what we're talking about here, Melanie?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think that, based on I loved that you went into that level, because I do think that, as I mentioned earlier, with the way that, applications are becoming available to us to create these virtual events, but also just create live videos, the whole term of producer or backstage support, these types of things are becoming more and more common, more talked about. But I loved that you described it the way you did, because to me, a live stream producer can be someone who is literally backstage in a browser-based software, supporting you, bringing up your overlays, and so that you can focus on the content, and then even them displaying comments or whatnot.
Yeah.
Or even messaging you privately to let you know, hey, you're 12 minutes in, you need to go.
Exactly.
Whatever. But what you described is this whole other. It's like what I just described is like level 1. What you just described is like level 10. It's like full blown event, and there is a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to consider, and I loved that you said like there's different definitions. There's different types of live stream producers. So
exactly, and your definition will be based on the type of events you do. But knowing the different, I guess, the spectrum, it helps you maybe if you're just doing this type of event to think of like, okay, what is my bandwidth for like reaching this level so I can do this other type of event? Maybe I need more support. Maybe I need more time. Maybe I need more knowledge. Maybe I need more expertise. Who knows? Like just going from here to here, there's a little bit of a journey, but it's achievable. If you really want to get here, there's so many ways in which you can, and it's up to you if you want to take that road, right?
So I was going to ask you, if somebody wants to get into producing live streams, how do they get started doing that? But I also want to make sure that I also kind of address, like, you talked about all these different roles that are available as a producer. And so I love the fact that, it's not just like I can tell it's just not this cookie cutter type model where, okay, I'm going to be a producer and I'm going to do just X. I think it depends on the complexity of the production. And it also depends on what types of productions you want to actually work in, because, it can get like, if you're just doing, for example, production, if I had a producer here, for example, there's not a whole lot they would have to do in this case, but
right.
I want to make it this like huge production of, for example, just an online live stream. There are a lot of individual tasks that can kind of be assigned to those people. And then if you want to take it a step further, you mentioned, almost like the third tier, which is the hybrid event side, which is doing the live stream aspect, but then also remembering, hey, there is also the in-person aspect. And then that introduces additional complexities because you may have to work with you may have to work with another contracted team that you have never worked with, for example. So in terms of, if somebody wants to get into like doing this, so you mentioned you kind of started, mixing, I think you started like running cables and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to get into this, like, what do you recommend? How do they get started? Like, is there a good entry point?
Absolutely. And Christian, this is a fantastic question, because anyone with an internet connection and a laptop and, a cloud-based software like StreamYard, they can get into live streaming with as little as you can imagine, right? I first went with, I think it was OBS at the time, because I wasn't aware of StreamYard, and I went live. Then I was like, oh, here's Zoom, so easy. Let's try Zoom. And then I went to YouTube Live, and I was like, I don't have all the options there. I'm going to try something else. And then I came across StreamYard, and then I used StreamYard as an avenue to do a lot of streaming within platforms. So this is not just, taking StreamYard as a software to stream to YouTube or Vimeo or whatever Facebook Live you're streaming to. It's it gets a little more complicated and more complex the moment you stream into other platforms and event softwares. But to start with a good internet connection and maybe a good laptop that's, maybe not as old as like 2 years. I feel like after 2 years, most laptops, computers, whatever, they start like crapping out. Start with something decent, right? And then if you can even start with like StreamYard Basic. Their basic plan is super affordable. I think it's free. I don't even know if it's free or not. I don't know. I haven't been on that in a while. But it's super easy to just get yourself up there. And honestly, if you are serious about it, the next natural progression is to, learn more and then invest into more equipment, maybe more gear, and probably even learn a few other softwares, like vMix, and just start, playing with the stuff and the toys and see what you can come up with. Because I feel the only stopper to this is your willingness to learn and your creative acumen. How much do you want to invest in this, and how creative you are to make it the best thing they can be for you. So going back to your question, anyone can start, to start producing live shows. Again, the simplest producing of a live show that I do, of a live stream, is my podcast. It's the same way what you guys are doing. That's the simplest level of producing, because I do it all by myself, and it doesn't require a bunch of extra support. I get everything lined up for me, like the same way you guys have, and with the lower thirds and the overlays and any intros, anything that you need to make that event happen, and that's a live stream.
Fantastic. Yeah. And so I kind of have a bit of a follow-up question to that. So we have a couple of people here I see in the comments as well. For example, we have Dimebag Darren Lowe here. He was asking, let me actually see if I can find this question. By the way, he had quite a few. Well, he's put quite a few questions in. These are good questions, by the way, if you're watching us live. So he was talking about, he liked to find a place in live stream production. He's found formal broadcasting background. He's got formal broadcasting background in radio. By the way, if you haven't heard Darren, he's got a great voice, by the way. But for example, like in his case, if he wanted to get into doing productions, how does he actually find that? Because for example, I know I can start by doing my own podcast and doing my own live streams. How do I then take it a little step further out than that and say, you know what, I want to actually start producing for other people? Is there something, is there a place I can go to find those? Or is it a matter of kind of going back to what you said, somebody's kind of drive, I guess you'd say, to go and find those opportunities? What do you advise there?
That's a great question. And I know I have a close friend actually interviewing my podcast, and we were discussing this, because for someone new that into live streaming, or maybe they do have a background in events, but they've done a lot of self-promoting projects and produced some shows for themselves, but didn't really quite get to the next step where you're actually getting some clients, is the first step, I would say, putting yourself out there, but also maybe going and shadowing someone and say, hey, I'm here to learn. I'm here to intern, right? Like, I'm not here to make a buck. I'm trying to learn as much as possible. And can I shadow you for the day? Can I maybe help with your event? And then you start learning. But then the next step is networking. You're going to have to start to have conversations, wherever you are, in person, online, where intentional conversations with people, and one thing leads to another, and the next thing there's going to be, I remember one of my biggest clients came from LinkedIn because they watched the podcast and they're curious about, hey, can you produce our event? This sounds great. Like, I love your podcast. I love the things that you do. And a lot of the things that I've done, which have nothing, they were not necessarily like lead generators in a way, right? They became lead generators because it was the type of content that I would produce. So yes, it does go, back to the type of content you produce. And there's some research out there that I was reading, how for a live streamer, having a well-produced shows will most likely guarantee you a client. But having a less than ideal produced show will most likely take 25% of the prospective clients that you could have had, right? So you have to be intentional about making the right connections, networking, and learning from people. I had to, again, going back to that friend that I was mentioning in the beginning, is she went and did a lot of pro bono support for other people, for other studios, like even going into a studio and learning. It's like, hey, I'm here to learn, I'm here to help, give me anything to do. And then you learn on the job, right? Opportunities like that are there. You just have to find them. I know in my own town here, where we are in Boise, there's quite a few studios that are doing live streaming at a good level of production, and nobody's gonna say, hey, I don't need you. Like, if you go there honestly saying, hey, I want to learn, I want to help, give me something to do, like anything, like I'll do anything just so that I can learn, right? And I remember, like, when I started back in event productions, like wrapping cable was my job, organizing all the warehouse, the inventory. I did things that were not fun, really, because my goal was like, I want to go and mix the fun shows. I want to go. No, you have to start somewhere where you're learning up to that level. And it actually helped me so much, because I learned so much in the process of organizing a warehouse, being able to learn about each piece of gear that was there before I was ready to use that piece of gear in an actual show. So I mean, that's my best tip, really. Nowadays, I know you're going to have to do a lot of reach out, on social media, because probably going in person might not be the right place. I don't know where you're at, in this wide world. And I don't know how flexible the rules are as far as social distancing goes. And now with the new variants, of this COVID virus. But I hope that that answers your question and sets you on to, getting into the actual events that will support and pay for your efforts.
Yeah, I loved that. I also loved that you talked about how the differences or the benefits of a high quality live production or a high quality event can have. There's obviously the direct benefits of you look better, you look more professional, you look like you're with it. You can potentially charge more for whatever it is you're putting your event on for, maybe get more customers from it. So why don't you do me a favor, and why don't you explain what, and I know that this could literally be like its own episode. So we could totally talk about this all day probably, but give some tips or some thoughts about what you view as a high quality live production, so help us understand what a high quality live stream looks like in your view, maybe break it down for our audience.
Yeah. And again, fantastic question. And I feel like the only limitation to this is really the budget. Mm-hmm. Are you just, maybe starting out and only have so much that you can put out there, but you still care to produce a high quality live stream? And if that's you, then maybe start with a good broadband, again, recently updated laptop. Anything maybe older than 2 years old is too old, too slow, whatever. Computer machines tend to do freak things once they start to get old, like us people. The live streaming tools, I feel like right now they're so easily accessible, and there's so many options. I mentioned OBS, StreamYard, Ecamm, vMix. I mean, just to name a few out there, but you can even rely on YouTube Studio, Restream, and other, proprietary platform studios that have this cloud-based broadcasting that you can start with. If you're producing for others, most likely the most common broadcasting solution is going to be vMix. And I say that a few times just because I know that has been the standard in the event industry to produce. And just because you have so many different options with that particular software, I don't necessarily love it 100% just because it's, Windows-based, but there's a lot of other things that you can add to that. And I guess start where you're at, and then start adding support tools to help you, hit your cues faster and make your life easier. And there's tools such as, the Stream Deck. Like I have a Stream Deck that I programmed just to do the the things in my studio that I need. Maybe a video switcher to have all your laptops and HyperDex and externals patched in. Maybe add a MIDI controller. Again, you add a little things, one thing at a time. Like if you're a podcaster, the Rodecaster is a great tool to add, so you can have all your inputs and your levels, and then your little cues, like I add sound effects to my podcast.
Nice.
I just love it. And then when nobody says anything, I go like no, really, I don't use that a lot, but I should. Anyway, that's a mixer and a controller in one, and it helps you to elevate the quality of your streams. And then if you're producing for yourself, right, then you gotta have a good microphone and some camera that is full HD or 4K. Those are a must. Like, you have to start there. And then if you're adding video switchers, I know Christian loves his A10 Mini Pro, and just because it makes, the switching easy, right? Exactly. Especially if you have different cameras. Like right now, I have a lot of equipment I'm not even using. I'm just using this one HD camera that sometimes I feel like throwing it out the window, but I don't know why I still use it. But there's a lot of, things that you can add so that you have the ability to switch on the fly, to add lower thirds, transitions, graphics. And I know a lot of people talk about like, well, my cell phone is the best camera I've got. And sure, there's a lot of consumer grade cameras out there that may suffice for like Twitch and YouTube streamers. But if you're going to do like B2B type of live streams, you certainly have to start investing a little bit more professional live streaming equipment to provide that top-notch user experience. And then it goes back to sound again, because one major reason for a live stream to not have that high quality is a level of production is sound, and also not being able to record at the highest quality that you could do, because once you have a poor recorded quality, like I had an episode that I had such a podcast episode, I had such a good content, such a good featured guest, and then my sound was horrible, and I'm like, garbage in, garbage out. There's nothing I can do about it. Might as well swallow it and humbly accept that even you can mess up and have really bad sound. But right now, I know that I need to put this episode out as it is, and maybe provide a disclaimer later, So it's like, you're gonna, even at the highest level, you're still gonna, hit some bumps around, on the road, and you have to be able to be teachable and learn from your mistakes and adjust and learn some more. But anyway, at a minimum, producing a high quality content and branding your live stream and using title slides and graphics for transitions will give you that high quality stream that, it's what we're all after, because we're no longer in the beginning of the pandemic when we all got out, on Zoom and everybody looked the same. Like now there's a different expectation. There's a different experience that people are looking for. There's a lot of options out there. StreamYard and Canva could be your best friends and a good internet connection to get you started. And I am so grateful that we live, in a day and age that it's so incredibly easy to produce high quality broadcasts that, not too long ago, it would take an entire broadcasting trailer worth of gear and, an army behind the scenes, maybe living on energy drinks and sneakers to pull it up. So, but we're not there. We're like so much farther away. So take those tools at your hand and use them for your benefit.
I love what you said about start with what you have. I know Christian and I are both very passionate about that, because so many people wait until they have all the fancy stuff and they don't get started. But some of this is, we've got, Coffee Talk and Tech even talking about learning from the ground up. I mean, you talked about that, you do have to experience some of this stuff to even get, because you can have all the fancy equipment you want. You mentioned, the A10 Mini, we talked about mixers and, high-end cameras and all those things. Those are all needed things for a certain level of live stream production or virtual event. But you can have all that stuff and not know how to use them or how to deal with, the quirks. The thing you also talked about, something's going to go wrong. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Something's not going to go the way you want. And those are also skills that you have to develop. Those are muscles you have to kind of work out. And you can't work those out if you're not going live or using video or creating or practicing or trying new things. And so I loved what you said about all that stuff. And, those features of the high quality streams are it's not just a person talking to the camera. It is using overlays and transitions and all those things. But, there's so much.
But I want to go a little bit more into more detail on that, because I know Christian wants to nerd out a little bit. So I cannot keep that away from him. Because really, that's the basic answer, the first level, right? It's like you start from where you're at, and then you're going to add all these little things to make the next level up of the production. But then really, how can you achieve a high quality live stream? Really, again, going back to investing in high quality live streaming equipment, as I mentioned earlier. But then you also have to go into a little bit more deeper into like encoder settings. And the moment I start talking about that, people kind of tune out and they're like, what does that mean? Oh my gosh, you just scared me, right? It's like, what is a video encoder? Like, why do I need that? It's like, where do I start with that? But really, you will need to start learning a little bit about what are the recommended live encoder settings if you're going to produce a high quality stream, right? Then you're going to have to learn about video codecs and frame rates and keyframe intervals and bit rates and audio codecs and all kinds of sample rates and things that you're like, oh Lordy, have mercy, because this is way too much. But I know that, nowadays, again, there's so much information out there that you can learn. And there's always a sweet spot that will determine, what is the size of the video that you're streaming based on the viewer's internet connection, that whatever they're withstanding. And you can adjust a lot of those settings that will relate to your video resolution, to the video bitrate and the audio bitrate, to make sure that you produce a high quality event and a live stream. And then you also have to look at the online video platforms that is going to help you maximize the video streaming that you're doing, the quality of this video stream. And by selecting the right OVP basically will stand for online video platform. And there's a lot of online video platforms out there that will help that. Again, we have one here, but also you have to look at what type of CDN, like what is the content? Where is that going to be sent to? And what is the distribution network that you're using for that? And what are the type of server support that they have? I mean, take Vimeo. Like I remember Vimeo, it's like a trusted source, like a trusted CDN. But I remember we are in the middle of a live stream for an event that was streaming into a swap card or one of the event platforms that we're working with. And somewhere in the middle of nowhere, one of the Vimeo servers like caught on fire somehow, somewhere, and it just shut down. And I mean, this is Vimeo. You trust Vimeo because they have hundreds and thousands of servers. And we were in the middle of the stream and like, what happened? Like, getting to Vimeo support, that's a different story. But it's like, if you're going to have problems with Vimeo, like you said, Melanie, you're going to have problems with a lot of other things. But then having the backup plan, the contingency plan, like I go back to planning a lot, because it's like, okay, we already talked about if something happens, what will we do in the case of like the whole world catching on fire, like maybe a Vimeo server catching on fire. Like, do you have that slide to put out? Do you have a little bit of a counter? Do you have a music? Do you have something to let your audience know, hey, we didn't go completely dark here. We're still alive. It's just we're, dealing with a little bit of technical issues. And welcome to, the reality. Reliable internet connection. I know that this has been mentioned a lot because it is important. And the reason why is important, as a video broadcaster, live streamer, you have to have your upload bandwidth to be at least twice as your broadcast bitrate. And there's a lot of ways to calculate that online. Nowadays, you can just go to like fast.com and figure out where your upload speed is. We do recommend, going on a wired Ethernet connection because Wi-Fi can be unstable. We know that, right? And I know those are like very intro level knowledge points, but they're necessary. If Wi-Fi is your only option, then maybe move closer to the router, right, to have clear signal, or close unnecessary web browsers and applications to free up some of the bandwidth, and like remove your kids from Netflix if you're gonna go live, like I had to do, or get a faster internet plan. And right now I know where I'm at in the neighborhood that I'm at the like max level, but I'm looking forward to fiber. And then we're going into things like transcoding and multi bitrate streaming, and those again are a little bit of like a nerd talk, but it does matter, especially when you're using a software like OBS and Vimix. You're gonna start to learn those terms really fast, because you need to be able to adjust them and manipulate them in order to create the quality stream that you're looking for. And also enables you to detect, whatever the viewer's internet speed is and adjust it accordingly, and choosing the optimal resolution. Again, going back to like a lot of things, like right now when you do StreamYard, you don't have to worry about, because you're like, everything is done for me. I'm just going to press live and it's fantastic. But if you're getting a little bit more into, again, that B2B production where you're using different softwares to support your event, you're going to start to think about those things, because they will help with your quality. And, we're talking about choosing the perfect resolution, and that sometimes requires a bit of a trade-off, because naturally you want your best video resolution for your stream, and you want your viewers to have this crystal view of your content. However, the highest resolution doesn't always equal to the best resolution when it comes to live streaming, because you want a resolution that provides clear image without being too big to transmit without lagging. And professional live streamers, they typically opt for the 720p 1080p. We all dream of 4K, but it's like, let's see how that comes on the other side. And then lastly, test. Test. If there's any other thing that I could say, because streaming has so many moving parts, testing is so important. And having a pre-stream testing routine will save you a lot of headache. Is basically also half the battle. Like, just take an example. If you were to stream onto a website and have this video embedded onto a website, make sure that looks correctly, like that's embedded correctly. We're streaming onto a landing page one time, and it was streamed from YouTube. So YouTube was the CDN, and try not to swear, but the chat would not embed on that landing page for the life of it. And it was so frustrating. We actually had to change CDNs, go to Vimeo. Vimeo chat is much easier to embed onto a website. But if we would have not done that testing prior to going live, we would have been like losing a lot of interaction and engagement from our audience, because they would get an error. Like, I'm trying to chat here with you guys, but you're like literally shutting the door in my face and it's not working, right? So that's basically, some of the things that I can think of. I'm sure both of you can add way more to that, but that's from the top of my head right now.
Definitely. But Mel, I think your mic actually went out. That's interesting. So
sorry about that.
No worries.
I was going to say, I know what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking is, screw all that. I'm just going to hire somebody to do this for me if I need one of these like high-end streams or events. And you mentioned StreamYard, which is what I use. I know obviously Christian uses that because it takes care of a lot of these things for you. But the beauty of the simplicity has limitations, right? So you get what you have, and there's the beauty in the simplicity. But if someone is wanting this different type of production, they're going to need a different platform. They're going to need to consider all these crazy things you just talked about that went way over my head. So I know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, when I get to that situation, or if I'm in a corporate or a business, I'm not messing with that. I'm going to just hire somebody to do that. But, Christian, I know, I don't even know what that costs. You know what I mean? So, Anca, why don't you just touch on that, like briefly, like what can somebody expect from a budgeting standpoint on that?
Yeah, and that's a fantastic question. And honestly, it so much depends on the project, on the event, on the client, on the role, right? Because we talked about many roles within this live streaming producer umbrella. And if you're maybe the main producer or you're the assistant to someone else's stream, cost, for just talking about bare like ballpark numbers, it can vary greatly. I've seen from like, I'm not gonna say $50 an hour, because we had like just before the stream, we were talking about having this conversation on social with someone that was like a true believer that they would never charge more than $50 an hour to produce a show, and we're like about to like kill them off. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say that live, but you know what I mean? It was like so frustrating. I'm like, how do you like produce someone's live stream and do not see the value that you are adding to that event? So I've seen, going cost varying from $75 an hour to $1,000 an hour. And it really depends on the project. It depends on how much pre-production work you'll be doing. Sometimes, when I budget for events, like if this is, say, a one-time live stream, I will have to take into account, I guess, again, how much work I'm doing prior to the event. Like I've done streams for good friends, for very little money, because they have set everything up, and all I needed to do is, again, come behind the scenes and press on this banner and press on this lower third, or like whatever they had going on ticker, and I mean that, sure, it does not take a whole lot of knowledge and brain power to do it. But then I also have events that are like 3 days conferences, virtual conferences, with a lot of elements, with a lot of graphics, a lot of content, and there's a lot of pre-recording that needs to be done, and there's a lot of elements that go into like, where are we streaming, and the stress of streaming into some of the platforms. I'm like, I gotta account for that too, So at that point, you look at this, RFP that you put together, and you're like, wow, this is a lot of money. But guess what? My time and what I'm bringing to the table is worth that, and I'm not going one dime under. And you have to take a position on that as well, and be aware, like, what do you bring to the table, and not short yourself, not sell yourself too short. I feel like women, especially live streamers, and I had this conversation with another live streamer, a great friend of mine. We sell ourselves a little too short, because if we don't know 100% of what we're bringing to the table, we feel insecure, and we feel like we're not ready. Where take Christian, he's gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna go and do it, even if I only know like 15% of what this event needs, because I know I'm gonna figure it out. And I'm not selling what I don't know, I'm selling what I know. And that's where we need to take a page out of the guys, live streamers books, and apply it. And it takes a little bit of confidence, and you gotta work on that maybe.
Yes, ma'am. That's right. I dig it.
And I want to bring up this question actually from and let me find, actually it's from Coffee Talk and Tech, a friend of ours.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about how he was asked to stream a state sporting event, and he could have made great money off of this, but he couldn't live up to the whole standard of, like, in his head, let alone the time involved. And as you mentioned, I mean, cost is super important. Thinking about, like, hiring a producer, for example, and then if you are, if you already have even if it's 15%, of like the skills you need, it's also getting out of your own head and saying, hey, you know what, I can do this. Like being confident. And this is all about camera confidence. It all factors in the same thing. It's about being confident at the skills that you have. Yeah. For example, you started, doing live streaming by like running cables, things like that. Like I literally got thrown into being a production assistant, for very large conferences, and but I was like a sponge. And I was like, this is actually a lot of fun learning about all these little, facets of it. And then like over time, like that's how, like, I've taken those skills, and I'm now able to apply those to different things. For example, it doesn't matter if I'm just doing my own podcast or I'm putting on another live show, for example. It doesn't have to be a huge show. It's getting out of your own head, I think, and just saying, hey, what I can do is lean on what you actually are good at.
Yeah, and absolutely. And going back to that time involved, sometimes I would ask myself, what is this event worth to give a shit? And then you attach whatever number it has to be, whatever time it has to take to make that happen. Because if you don't care and you're not gonna invest yourself, into it, then why do it, And maybe that works for some people. I don't know. Like, I like to put heart into what I do, and I put a lot of pressure and intensity, and sometimes that's a little too much for some people, right? But that's me. I mean, that's how I am, and that's how I operate. I don't go into it unless I'm 100% committed. And if I can give 100% of myself, then might as well go and do something else, And it will have to be the battle in your mind that you have to win in the first place before you can even, go out there and put yourself out there. Going on somebody else's experience, again, a friend of mine, her biggest challenge was charging more. And she could not get herself to the point of charging what she was worth, because in her mind, she was always like doubting that she's worth that much. That's not the client's problem. That's your problem. Going to have to solve it in the first place and get over that mindset hurdle before you can even get to tell them, hey, here's how much. And the client, when they receive the bill, they're like, okay, fine, sign off on it. And she's like, I spent how many, weeks, like literally like terrified about just getting this out there in the first place,
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of mindset stuff when it comes to around, whether you're a live stream producer or whether you're a coach or a consultant or anything. There's so much mindset that goes into charging what you're worth. And I loved what you brought up about what's the event worth to your client if you're producing it for them, right? Like what is the outcome they're desiring to get? And sometimes that's a really great way to get that mindset into the right place, which is to create those valuations. So I love this. Now we have a lot of people that listen to this podcast and kind of tune into, this live show that are not a big company or a B2B. They are, a solo live streamer, but they are up and coming, or they are maybe wanting to add some extra kind of, pizzazz to their live streams, and they need that support. I know, for example, myself, I do a lot of solo streams. I'm not a big company. I have guests, and there are times when I'm like, gosh, I wish I had someone helping me. So can you, like, if somebody who is a solo live streamer, they can also find a live stream producer, but how would they go about finding someone and knowing what they need, if you will? So do you mind just touching on that a little bit and helping some of our small people out there that aren't in these big virtual events that they're putting on?
Absolutely. And I absolutely, as a, solo streamer, you can certainly use, the help of another live stream producer. Again, that's where that assistant producer comes in mind. And especially, in my experience, because again, a lot of times I'm a solo live streamer, but then I also do a lot of events in which I need the support of other streamers, other assistants, or maybe other producers or other production houses. And there's events that require that type of support because they have so many different elements and transitions and graphics and just aspects of the stream that truly require more than just two hands, And I've produced, for example, virtual conferences with concurrent sessions where you really need several other assistants to handle the other streams. And I've worked with assistants that honestly I found by networking, by talking to other people, by following certain, live streaming threads and just talking with people. And it's like, hey, I see that you're doing this. Like, hey, let's connect. I have at least 3 live streamers that I can call on text, like on a moment's notice, knowing that they would support my events because I never met them in person, but I met them somewhere online and I've called on them when I needed support. And, it does take a little bit of work because finding the right operator, the really good operator, takes some trial and error. And I remember at some point, it was mid-June this year, and I was working on 3 concurrent events that week. And it was just crazy. And I needed to assign some of the duties to other people. leading to that, I was just trying to find people, especially this was for Vmix operators. And it felt like everyone on that one day in June was busy working events. And then I reached out. I reached out to my network. I was like, okay, anybody that knows a really good Vmix operator, please let me know who that person is and give me their contact, because I really need to find them. And I ended up with a new list of about 10 different live streaming operators. And that was great. I didn't need all of them, but now I have the list, right? So then when I run into that problem again, into that conundrum, now I have an opportunity. I have someone to reach out to. And so the same way, if you are new and, you just need some support, I would say just, network and have a conversation. Reach out to someone, via DM or email or LinkedIn messaging and say, hey, I've seen some pictures you posted. I see you're doing some cool stuff. Like, let's have a quick chat. How can we support each other? And I'm a big fan of like, how can we support each other? Because there's enough business to go around to make all of us happy. And having that abundance mindset has only helped me. It has never put me in a position where I'm afraid, like, because I'm highlighting all these live streamers on my podcast, now all my clients are going to go to them. You know what? If they will go to them, I'm happy that I supported them, and I provided a platform for my clients to find someone that meets their needs. And I never felt like I'm losing because I'm promoting somebody else. And that just means, getting out there and having a conversation and reaching out to someone. If you see someone doing something cool, go out to them and tell them, hey, obviously on social, or in person, who knows, and tell them, hey, I see you're doing some really cool things. Like I'm really, I'm really willing to, learn some more. Like, tell me what else, is that you're doing, and how can we help each other? I think this has been, again, for me, because I'm very relational in that sense, has always started with a conversation, like started with a, hey, you look awesome and I want to know you. Can we talk?
I love it.
This is I gotta say, this is just great, fantastic info. Actually, I want to just sum up a couple of quick points, and I got one more question for you. And this is like a softball question. It's like super easy.
Okay.
So, I think the first thing I want to just drive home is that, it's doing your research. There's a couple takeaways here. One is doing your research. So, for example, if you're looking to get into being a live stream producer, for example, go and do your research on like what the cost might be. I'm looking at some of the comments, and people are saying, hey, you know what? Like, they charge like $600 for like a full day event, for example, for just a couple of like what seems like really basic work. But again, you're tapping into somebody's expertise, So I think that's a key point. And then the other point I think I want to also make, and you mentioned this quite a few times, it's networking. So, networking is super important. For example, if people want to, learn more about like, if maybe, for example, maybe they're people that are just getting started and they feel comfortable, for example, with Anca here, like go and network with Anca, for example, follow, for example, the Launch Your Live channel, follow, your Trifan events like channel. So go and follow and network with those people. Because here's the thing, and this is why I always ask that first question, how did you get started, for example? And it's because everybody started somewhere, and there are certain times where people have gotten into their field and like they got into it doing exactly what it is they're doing today. For example, like they kind of, they started doing some of the basic things like you mentioned, running wires, for example, or putting on gaff tape, or like, hey, I'm helping,
I love gaff tape, Christian.
Like so many little things that, you can do to get your foot in the door to be a producer, and then you work your way up. So for example, and also last, I think the other key takeaway was, you got to get out of your own head sometimes with things and be confident in your skills, but don't oversell your skills as well. Like, okay, you know what, if you don't know of like some of the platforms you mentioned, for example, earlier, Anca, then maybe that person needs to start with some of those other positions and work their way up on the side, learning those, platforms and whatnot.
And another thing that I would add to this, like maybe more tied into that research phase that you're mentioning, a lot of solo event producers like myself, we might have our month full with events, and then at one point we reach our limit. Having that networking done in advance and having that type of conversations, it would mean that right now I have a list, 5 people on my mind that if I cannot do an event on this day, I'll refer my client to that person. I already have the referral in place because I know that this person we talked about, we had a conversation. I trust, their skills. I might not trust maybe 100% their skill level because I haven't seen their events, but enough to give a referral and say to my client, hey, I can't do this. I'm booked like to my teeth right now, but here's a couple of options for you. And this is what builds that, give referrals, and then you'll see the return on that as well, because the same person might say the same thing to their client when they're booked to their teeth. And it's a two-way street. It's like everything in life, if you're going to be bountiful out of your own resources, you'll see that come back, multiplied. So
definitely. Yeah. And so that last question I had for you, by the way, was where can people get in touch with Anca Trifan? Where's the best place?
The best place is LinkedIn, especially for business opportunities, just because I do connect with a lot of the my clients on LinkedIn. But then if you want to see the behind the scenes side of me, head on over to Instagram. That's where my life happens. And in Instagram stories, all the professional is on the post. And then behind the scenes is like the wild side of Anca. Like sometimes people are like, are these two different people that I'm looking at? I'm like, no, it's the same person. But one is like the business side and the other one is like the fun side. Trifan_events on Instagram, Events Demystified podcast on Instagram as well, which I'm trying to grow, which has like 3 followers, but maybe you can be the 4th. So.
Very cool. So we'll make sure we put those in the comments. I want to thank everyone who's been tuning in. I mean, it's been fantastic having you on, Anca. Just a couple of quick notes, by the way, to everybody who's watching or listening. This has been episode 82 of the Launch Your Live podcast and live stream. And basically, again, if you want to learn more about this episode, for example, all you have to do is go to launcher.live/EP82. That'll get you over to the YouTube video, the podcast episode as well. But we will see you all on essentially a future episode. We're going to talk more about live streaming, interview some more people, talk about more topics as well to help you continue to level up your live streams. But with that, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Have a great, rest of the week. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.